Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 14, 2022 revised order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 38, Section 18, meetings of the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted both in person and remote until further notice. In-person attendance is limited to Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee members, superintendent, and district school administrators. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this time. However, the meeting may be accessed remotely. Agenda items are listed with those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB and the school committee recorder and will be broadcast. Once transcribed and approved, minutes will be made public and posted to our website. So first, I'll take a roll call vote. Roll call attendance. Excuse me. Ann Hutchinson.
Aye.
Jason St. Peter.
Aye.
Sean Stephen is not here. Bonnie Bafoni is not here. Molly Thomas.
Aye.
Bill Fields.
Here.
Diane Singer.
Yes.
Corey Sprague.
Aye.
Rich Mahoney. Aye. And Steve Bannon present. We have in our packet the minutes from September 1st, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Ann.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Molly.
Aye.
Bill.
Yes.
Diane.
Yes.
Corey.
Aye.
Rich.
Aye.
And it's unanimous. And turn it right over to the superintendent's report.
Okay, we'll start first with some good news. I don't think we've got students on the call tonight. There may be an athletic event that's keeping them from being here. So, Katie, what's shaking in Muddy Brook?
Let's see, we had both Dot Day and International Peace Day this week, so there were different activities going on in the different classes. Teachers did their third and maybe final, but we did ask for more training in IM for the illustrative math program this week. And we're having small early wins in our data teams to set up some different types of interventions for kids to try to get them up to speed.
Great. Ben?
What's that?
Hold on.
Dot Day, it's a story that there's one dot and a little girl doesn't know what to draw in art class, and the teacher tells her to just draw a dot first. And then there's a whole story that goes along with it. The kids did all that.
Our 5th and 6th grade went on an annual opening of the school year trips. 6th grade hikes up Mountain Mountain, and 5th grade goes out to Beartown and hikes around Benedict Pond. It's just a really nice community building and connecting, and 5th grade especially to our science curriculum, which is really exciting. All of our students got to see a screening of a documentary, the first episode of a documentary put out by Music in Common, which is a Berkshire County started music organization that brings people together. It's the Black Legacy Project, and it highlights the legacy of African American music and American history. So it's really great that all our students got to see it. It really just highlights our new performance music program with community teachers. It's really exciting. We also had our open house, our Meet the Teams night on Tuesday night. Very well attended, especially post-pandemic. Very impressed, and got a lot of positive feedback from families. And it speaks really well to how the teams are put together this year, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, just really own their communities. And it was just really cool to see all the teachers explaining and the parents just really excited and asking questions, but mostly just coming away for performance. So it was really good. So things have just come up to a really good launch.
Christy.
All right, so I'll start with some early wins around advisory this year. Our new SEL leads have been meeting weekly after school with Peter Pogowski and I, and engaging in planning, much more intentional planning around advisory, and then they meet with their teams each week to implement the activities. Part of that last week tied to our pep rally that was leading up to our big football game last week. I actually think it was one of the best pep rallies we've had in years because of the work we did in advisory. And then, as you all probably know, we had well over 600 people Friday night for the football game. That big win, which was really exciting and a great community event. This next week, on Thursday and Friday, we do have our SAB, our Student Adult Advisory Board retreat. We have 50 students signed up to go with 10 adults to Camp High Rock. And they're going to be doing work with Up for Learning and building the student voice and their work for the year. So what they're supposed to be doing is thinking about what are the student issues that are arising out of advisory, and then creating an action plan for the year on how they're going to work and address those things together with adults. So that's pretty exciting. We also have 30 students, our English learners, who are going to be going on a field trip next Friday down to Mount Everett for Hispanic Heritage Month, and then we will be hosting an event at Monument connected to that. We have sent out communication to all families with the document proficiencies grading and leveling up with a Google form to collect feedback. We've already been getting some responses. There's been some great feedback, really good questions and clarifications that are going to help us refine our practice as we move forward. I want to remind folks that we have our first Tuesday parent council meeting next week from 6 to 7:30 in the library. And that's going to align with a visit from Jen Sloat. She's from Redesign. She's connected to our Rethinking Grading Grant, and she's going to be in the district next week on Tuesday and Wednesday to hold focus groups with groups of teachers, students, and she's going to join the parent advisory session that we have so that she can collect information and gather feedback on our assessment and grading practices as she helps us try to create our strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years on how we're going to move forward with our shift to proficiencies. And then I want to highlight, yesterday we had our half day. Dr. Tanya Moorhead was back in the district with us, and she was visiting classrooms and doing instructional coaching with teachers. And then we had our teams working on refining their grade 9-12 indicators aligned to our graduation competencies and content areas. So work is moving along.
Cool. Thank you. And typically we'd have an opportunity for students to share things, but I think they're out of practice.
Oh, I should mention, new students are being voted on when they go to their retreat, so.
Right. So by our policy says that students should be selected by October 1st. So at our next meeting, we should have 2 high school representatives and hopefully also one middle school representative. Great. So let me sort of tell you where we're going. We're going to have Iona Smith talk a little bit about wellness. Obviously, wellness is a pressing issue for all of us, but particularly for students and families. And she's put together like a slide deck that I'll project in a sec that'll hold it all together. But I think this is a particularly good one to have. Let her share some thoughts and then have a dialogue around it. So let me just get it up. And just give me a sec to the slideshow. Okay. Say the word and like wave at me when you want me to flip the pages.
Yeah, okay. So before we even go in, and just this PowerPoint in general is really just to keep me on track. There's so much that's going on that I wanted to make sure I had a visual and that you all had too, so that we can sort of touch on so many of the different things. And before I start, I mean, the good news is this is like the most normal start of school that we've had in a few years. And so there's so much to be celebrated in that, but I also think that it's really important that in terms of us thinking about wellness, that we are still really connected to the effects of what's happened, transpired over the past few years. So you can click ahead. So these are just a couple of quotes to just sort of put us in that context. Yes, we've had a great, strong start of the school year, but I had an educator share with me this quote at the end of the school year last year saying that, you know, they had really thought that at the end of the 2021, in this June 2021, that there would never even possibly be a more difficult year for teachers and students. Like there's just no way. And what really ended up happening was that last year actually was much more difficult for both groups, right, and families. So although it's really to be celebrated that we have just started in a way that feels so much more normal and is so much more hopeful, I think that it's also really important this second that one of our counselors shared with me that, you know, a real important part of our work is that as a community, school community and our families, that we are also really focused on the healing process and sort of what does that look like. Yeah. So one of the things that I think about, Peter, you can switch it to next.
No, I'm
okay.
fine.
Okay. So one of the things I think about in terms of this healing, I'm just using the quote of this counselor for our community. How can we most effectively do that, right? And one of the ways that we can, or a really important part of us being able to do that and do that well, is for us to have the data of exactly what we're dealing with. And I have been on just as a part of the Mass Ideas program as a community member, and then this past year plus a few months in this position, have really been able to see Berkshire Hills make a big shift towards really developing a culture of data, right? So it's still emergent, it's still, we're trying to figure it all out, but there's some great things that are happening that I just want to highlight. So our social emotional learning panorama surveys are continuing to go out. It's mapped out for this year of how that is rolling out. And that gives us a real baseline of the social emotional needs, places where we have students who are flagging in certain ways so that we can actually add some extra supports in for those students. We also piloted last year, and this year we're going to do much more extensively through our DESI grant, the SEL grant. We're going to be working with, we've already started to pilot the universal mental health screening. So last year we did the entire 5th grade and the entire 9th grade. It went quite smoothly. We were able to flag some students that really have been completely under the radar, even with our Panorama and those different assessments that we were able to do through that platform. So this year we're looking at doing it for all grades in the middle school and high school. We've met with those clinical teams, the SEL leads at the middle schools helping to support that. And we have that mapped out to roll out this year, which is really going to be able to help us really find some of those students that on paper look great, that they're doing well, when in fact there's different issues that we have the ability to support and address through these measures. And then we're continuing with the prevention needs assessment, so that's the one with really looking at our protective factors and risk factors in the substance use of our students. It's the 8th, 10th, and 12th graders that take that. So that has always informed us about how we go forward with programming. It continues to do so and helps inform different programming that we're doing through the clinical side and in classroom side. There,
I got one.
All right, now this one's smaller. I'm gonna pull it on my own screen so I can see. So I've already spoken about how advisory and or actually Christy was speaking about advisory and then the strong crew program that's happening at the middle school. So both of those programs are just continue to have support added to them. The SEL Leads this year is really helping in that effort to do the best we can with these spaces. And we know that students perform optimally when they felt seen and heard and that they belong. And these are two spaces within schools that can really help us get all of our students to those spaces or to those feeling states. I am going to be able to work this year. We have, I will be rotating between the SELL meetings at the different schools to help also further the work with Ruler. So the social emotional learning that we had done some training and investment in last year that the adults in the building had some access to, but now how do we spread that out into our student population? Restorative Practices is very exciting. Both the high school and the middle school have a lot of programming happening. The exciting thing at the middle school right now is that starting next week, I believe it is, right, Ben? Starting next week, the entire school community, including, we're gonna have representatives from Stockbridge, from the district office, that are gonna be trained in some basic restorative practices. So it's the basic 3-hour training, and it will be done during the cruise. They'll be connecting crews together, so small groups. So the students, adults, and administrators will also be all other folks that work within the building. So there'll be food service and custodials that will all be trained in the same language together. And it will roll out over a 6-week period, I think it is, to hit everyone in that building. And so we're using that as our model and our test point. We're able to do that through our DESI grant with SEL. And so that's super exciting. I cannot wait to be part of that. There's also with the restorative practices work some really great connections between the high school and the middle school, where the high school students are they've done some trainings together, but also the high school students are going to be coming down to the middle school. We've also had a lot of conversation in the elementary school about how the Second Steps program actually really is a restorative practice program, and how to see that as the formative way and have languaging that they will be part of once they get into the middle school. Collaborative care through the DESI grant as well. We've been able to expand into the high school last year. And one of the things that was really wonderful through that last year is that we were able to get folks from the community. So when we were able to identify extra needs that were needed for psychoeducational groups in the different buildings, once those were identified, we were able to have our collaborative care leadership team do some networking out to the community of how do we get a bilingual. At the high school, we were able to get a bilingual psychiatrist to come in and work with some of our ELL students. We were able to get child therapists to be able to come in and run groups at both the elementary and the middle school. And we're working now sort of identifying the needs so that we can continue to support in ways that feel right. The wellness curriculum at the high school has been, that we had another summer session of really what worked, what didn't work, because it's very new, just the past couple of years, that we actually have divided by grades and can be very thoughtful about curriculum, wellness curriculum. So there's been a lot of work towards that, and we're getting there. It's also proving to us that we might need additional support there, and we'll get to that at a certain point, but that maybe adding actual health classes at that level might be good in the future. And then youth mental health first aid. We had a mission last year to get as many people in our community trained in youth mental health first aid. Last year, we were able to do trainings in the spring that a lot of teachers, educators came to, paras, And then in June, we actually did a full day on Saturday with almost all of our bus drivers. And as we were trying to schedule, because we really do want all of our staff, our coaches, everyone who works within the system to have access to this. And it's actually quite hard to, especially the rest of the world also wants to be trained in mental health first aid at this point, based on where we are as a community, as a country after the pandemic. I actually went and did the training the trainer program so that I can become the trainer for us. I did one with the bus drivers. I actually had my first, we had to co-teach twice. I've been able to do one. I have another one scheduled in late October. And from there, I'll be able to roll it out myself, and we'll be able to work with our own schedules here in a way that makes more sense, and we really can get everyone through.
I don't know, can you also talk about, and people might not have picked up on this when you said the community, can you talk about some of the other organizations that also got their folks trained?
With the
mental health first
The
aid.
mental health, it has really been across the board. We community partners at Restorative Project, that all those folks have gotten trained. Many of the folks who are part of the Southern Berkshire Community Health Coalition, which is wide reaching, have all been offered and within the community context. So we're looking at Rural Health Network, the people that we work with, collaborative care, have all had access points within the community to get that.
And like Berkshire South,
Berkshire
Right.
South hosted all of the, those ones from the community, yeah.
Cool.
And they also hosted our, the one for our bus drivers.
all right, keep going.
And then just the last thing, something that I had tried to get up and off the ground last year, that was a commitment, was to really revisit and fulfill the mandate through the state to work with our school wellness policy. Over the summer, I applied for getting coaching on that through the state, and we were accepted into that program. We were waiting for them to give us our dates but they will be with us monthly to help us really sort of work through that in the community. So as soon as I'm in communication now, we know really what our dates are. We're going to send that out in newsletters and different ways to try to get representations from all parts of our community at that committee. So we can start moving that forward.
Great.
That's what I got.
Any questions?
Wow.
Okay, good. So thank you. I think this is something we'll come back on and revisit. And it's okay that people don't have questions now. Think up questions, reach out to Anna or reach out to me. We'll go forward. So the next one, and this is going to make some people's heads explode. There is a notion that instead of planning meeting to meeting, we should plan year to year as a school committee, or even multiple years. So I sent around a memo in the packet that's sort of overwhelming, which has a list of potential topics, and then the beginning of sort of fleshing out of primary and secondary topics at each meeting, knowing that we probably want to hold 20% of our meeting time for the unexpected, because we don't know what's going to happen, but something is going to happen, right? And we'll need to talk about that. So I put together a big list that are tied to our goals. We wrote really quite a long time ago, and then are tied again to the four like columns I had that I shared at the beginning of the year, and then are broken down in other areas. I don't think it makes sense for us to have a presentation on the arts every year. There's so many other things going on. It may make sense to get in a cycle of 1 year we have a presentation on the arts, the next year we have a presentation on music, but I think grounding our work more in the day-to-day of learning and teaching will be valuable. And then there's some functional things, right? Like every year you vote on a budget in March. So we have to do a whole bunch of budget things in January and February to be able to vote on that. And Rich will talk a little bit later tonight about the first finance subcommittee we had of the year and what we talked about. So I don't know if this makes the most sense to go through this in the most nitty-gritty way, but two things that would be really valuable to me, is this is a living document, is what's missing and should be included, and if there's anything that's not prioritized that should be prioritized. So I know some of you are really detail oriented and wrote pages of notes on this, and if you got anything to share, that's great. Others of you might still be digesting it, and I'll take feedback later as well.
So any comments right now?
I have a couple
Sure, go ahead,
questions.
Mark, yeah.
And I guess to your point, Peter, about things that maybe got left out, and maybe they're not left out and they were implied in other things.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
So one of them, because I've talked about this before, we talk about kind of setting up goals and things like that at the district level and then at the school level. And one thing I keep asking about is making sure that we're setting aside time to review the current plan and kind of go over it, like looking back before we look ahead. And that doesn't get done. And so I would just want to see that kind of planned for somewhere.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good, and maybe that's end of May, beginning of June then.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you think it makes sense. But so that was one thing. Parsing through the MCAS data, I know that comes out at some point and that gets discussed. That seems to be, I don't know if that's in proficiencies in April or if there's somewhere else that happens.
Yeah, what's gonna happen with the MCAS data, so I got an email about it today. We have our internal data, but it's really embargoed, right? So I can't talk about it. And then on Monday, the 26th, we're gonna get our internal data in relation to the state data. And then on, I think of the days, right, Thursday, the 29th, the state data is gonna become public. So the timing is going to be such that we're not talking, I'll talk about it a little tonight, but we're not really talking about tonight. At our next meeting, we'll do a high-level overview on the MCAS data in each of the schools and across the district, and where we outperform the state and where we underperform the state. The thing, and you might have been paying attention to this, but in addition to the MCAS, there's this big national thing called the NAEP. And for the first time in 30 years, that those numbers are down, right? It's sort of in the toilet. So we'll frame looking at our own data in the context of that. But the nice thing about the state is we can go back 5 years and look at where we were in relation to the state. So it's obvious everybody's, not in all places, but in many places, everybody's data got a little wonky because of COVID, right? Because we weren't in school and we had half as much time to learn as we typically did. And there wasn't even testing data that year in the middle of COVID. But there's some really interesting things we'll look at, and always celebrations in some areas for growth.
But where she's saying, where does that fit in on this? We're talking about our.
Yeah, so I think and maybe I didn't explicitly put it in, it should go in October. So proficiencies assessment and grading, assessment implicitly in my thinking is MCAS, but I didn't put that in.
Yeah, that's what I thought, the formal data updates.
No. And ultimately, what I'd like to do is I'd like to sort of have two sides of the coin. So the external MCAS data is one thing, and our internal proficiencies is something else. Okay, Corey, you got more?
A few, yeah. Sorry. I'm gonna spare you. I'll give you this document after. So Chrissy mentioned the whole idea that student reps, new student reps are being identified, but I just thought we've got in here elections and reorganization for November. So if September is the time, but I feel like we should put that in explicitly in the schedule to keep ourselves on that, just to make sure that we continue to find students and continue to have student voice.
Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is, under the proficiencies assessment, which now includes MCAS and grading, I'll put in student elections and reorg. Okay, so the school committee cycle of elections is tied to election day, and the students' elections is tied to October 1st.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And then the one other one that I have for the timeline is just a review of grants. I know you did that last year at some point, and I feel like we have so many
Yeah.
at this point, and that was a very useful discussion, and so that's something that I would like to see.
I wonder, and push back on this, but I wonder if we should do it in April after the budget. We've sort of caught our breath. If that's a place where it makes sense.
The school committee had asked that we go over the revolving funds and grants, so I was thinking about that in October, so maybe we could look again.
Well, prior to the budget as opposed to after.
Right, so maybe we do grants from a dollar perspective in October, and then grants from a more programmatic perspective in April. This really was just meant to be a straw man to provoke conversation. So, straw person, yes, thank you. If Corey, you got more?
No.
Okay, anybody else got any? All right, we'll come back to that. So the next thing, and I can introduce this, and I think Rich and Steve both have something to say. But one of the things we need to do is appoint a building committee. And that's a statutory thing, and Rich will talk a little bit about this. And what we're proposing tonight, and I'll just give a paper copy to folks, is a slate of people. And we worked hard to come up with people that fill all the statutory obligations. On the other side of this, and we have to vote on it and submit it to the state and get their approval. On the other side of this, there's another thing called the Outreach Committee, which is not a state structured thing. It's just smart. And I would like to make a parallel group that maybe is a little more fluid, and people come on and off it, that focuses on outreach. So a few more people reached out to be on the building committee than can be on the building committee, because at a certain point it just gets unwieldy. And anybody who reached out to be on the building committee who were recommending not be on the building committee, I would like to recommend they be on the outreach committee, but I'd like to kick the can on the outreach committee for a meeting or two. Though in some ways, the outreach committee may even be more important, particularly the end of this year and going into next year. So the quick summary, we're in the eligibility period with the MSBA. We have 270 days, so the middle of April, and there's some very specific tasks the building committee needs to do at this point. And then there's some people in the district that have to do some of these tasks. So we have to agree to the magic enrollment number. That's a big one. We have to articulate our educational plan and existing spaces, and we have to articulate our existing Chapter 74 programs and where we want to go. We already did the vote to allocate the money for the next phase of this, which was like brilliant that we got that done. So we don't have to worry about this. But then all this work sets up then the next phase of this, where we hire folks and get a architect and come up with a really cool but utilitarian, simple design that's cost effective and wonderful. Okay, any questions on this? I think for the purposes of, should I read the names on it?
I'll make the motion.
We can do it as part of the motion.
That's good, but yeah, I make a motion. I move that in accordance with 963 CMR 2.00, the following names with appropriate designations to be submitted for review and approval to the Massachusetts School Building Authority on the form as prescribed by the Municipal School Building Authority. Those names being Stephen Soul, Sharon Harrison, Peter Dillon, Jason St. Peter, Steve Bannon, Christy Farina, Kara Staunton-Strawn, Daniel Bailey, Eric Gabriel, Stephen Boyd, Bill Fields, Diane Singer, Ananda Tim Payne, Jamie Goldberg, and Lily Haskin Vaughn.
We have a second.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second discussion.
Just one thing that I'd like to share. The bulk of the people are from Great Barrington, but there are at the moment 2 people from Stockbridge and also 2 people from West Stockbridge. And Steve and Sharon are both involved in multiple levels in their roles in the district. Steve checks the box for a procurement officer and also stuff around buildings and facilities, and Sharon checks the box around financial management.
Yeah, so the form that was referenced in the motion is like, you have to give like what each person's role is. It's like, everybody has their slot.
Any other questions or discussion? So this is a roll call vote. Ann?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Molly?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Cory?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
And I, it's unanimous.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll work hard to schedule a meeting. We may be doing 1 meeting a month, likely on a Thursday when we don't have a school committee meeting, and likely at 5:30, which sort of seems to be a sweet spot between people who are leaving work and we try to get to a meeting and people who need to go home and feed their kids and put them to bed. Great, thank you. So what I'd like to happen next is for John Bruno to give a little update on both PD, professional development, and instructional coaching.
Thanks, Peter. So the district has committed to extended professional development opportunities for all staff. This summer, 2022, we provided numerous opportunities for staff, ranging from safety care and CPR training all the way to instructional practice support with PELs. In addition to district level opportunities, we offered multiple levels at each school level. Multiple opportunities at each school level, sorry. At the high school, there were multiple learning opportunities, which we heard a little bit about from Christy earlier, and from mine too. They're aimed at really focusing on our inclusion and fairness initiative. There was in-depth training with the 9th and 10th grade teams and refining grading practices and better understanding what proficiencies look like, and differentiated training and supports from multiple partners that we have working with us there. We continued our rigor, relevance, and purpose work through the BAR grant, where teachers discussed shifting instructional practices to better meet the needs of each individual student. One of the highlights of the summer, which both Iona and Christy talked about, was the student training facilitation that is really supporting our youth and adult partnership work. And through that, we changed the student advisory board to the student and adult advisory board. And as you heard, 60 folks from the high school are going on a retreat next week at Camp High Rock to do some more facilitation training and work together as students and adults, and that's really, really exciting work. And really exciting here as well. At the middle school, they did many things, and a couple were working on proficiency-based learning, specifically proficiency-based feedback with assistance from Great School Partnership, and they did a bunch of really good work on the Du Bois Curriculum Project and the Du Bois Legacy Project Institutes. Then the elementary school also continued their work that they started in the spring about refining their processes and behavioral supports, and they did a lot of great work on the curriculum from pre-K all the way up to fourth grade there. More of these opportunities can be found in the link in the packet. And then for this school year, FY23, we see us continuing an ongoing work refining practices and developing and working on new curricula. We continue our proficiency-based learning work across all schools and departments. We got some great feedback from Christy at the beginning of the meeting about the work that we did at the high school yesterday on this. It sounds great. And we're working on finalizing our proficiencies this fall and then working on performance indicators more in the spring. And then also getting support from our multiple partners, Great School Partnership, Josh Thomas's and Tanya Moorhead on this work. We're aligning our math curriculum, K to 12, using illustrative math, which Katie talked about. I was at the elementary school with them yesterday, working on that. It was really, really exciting work. And we're gonna get continued support on that through illustrative math this year, but also through our partner Teachers Development Group, which have already agreed and understand the work and are extremely familiar with the curriculum. Are going to help us and the teachers throughout the year this year. So we're sort of bringing multiple groups together in both of these initiatives to get teachers up to speed so that we can successfully teach the students. And that all that curriculum we're able to purchase through a grant from DESE that we got. We continued the social emotional work, which both Christy and I also talked about, and that work is funded through the mental health grant that we have and the PD impact grant as well. And one of the highlights was mentioned already, the restorative justice training that's happening next week. I'm really excited to do that myself and everyone in the offices as well. It's been great to work with the staff and the students together for a couple hours. It's going to be really cool. Our instructional leads also are continuing their important work of improving student learning outcomes through improved academic instruction and assessment. These folks really work really hard. They meet every week. They meet with their ILG groups, which is instructional learning groups, and they are really like coaches and cheerleaders for this work together. So they're getting extra training and they're becoming sort of our in-house experts on proficiencies and learning through proficiency-based learning. And it's really exciting to work with them. I sat in a meeting at the high school just Tuesday, and it was one of the best IL meetings I've been to in 2 years. Really cool how they're progressing along. And as also Peter mentioned in the packet, the portion of the graduate work was kind of delayed by the pandemic. We're accelerating that work. I just met the group, Iona and I met. So we have multiple groups there. We're the sort of at the district level, the sort of, what do we call ourselves? We're like doing the heavy lifting for everyone. Then we have a group of smaller group with us and community members and parents and teachers and administration that are sort of the under a working group. And then we have multiple community meetings that are set up already. We just finalized scheduling them, and we'll be reaching out to everyone about these in the next 4 months. We'll be meeting 4 times over the next 4 months with the greater community to get everyone's input to build the portrait graduate, which we hope to bring to you in June of 2023. So it's really cool that we're moving along, finally, again, getting back on that train, which is great. And we continue this work together. The administration also has its own professional development that it does, and it also sits with staff together in this learning that we're doing in the schools. And developed a calendar that is also linked in your packet that enumerates all of the things that we're doing throughout the year, almost the day-to-day weekly basis. And thank you, and we appreciate your support in providing meaningful professional development to our staff.
Comments, questions? Go ahead.
Just a question, obviously it's a lot to practice, and I'm just wondering, how does teacher voice weave into this?
So I left out of that and I wrote in my notes, we have a professional development committee, which met a couple times last year. We just met again a couple of days ago or 2 weeks ago. And that meets at least quarterly through the year, and that's open to all of the teachers to come and meet with us. I'm always there. Peter tries to be there as much as he can. and it's open to everyone in the district to come and talk about what they need, what they see. When I came here, not last winter, but the winter before, I did a survey of the teachers to see what their input was. I plan to do that again in the next couple of weeks, and then bring back results to the next professional development committee so we can talk about it together.
And then is there a way that the efficacy of the learning, like the specific events, does that get tracked, or do you get feedback from that too? In terms of whether or not things are worthwhile?
Yeah, we generally have like exit tickets, we call them in the classroom, and you get collect feedback from teachers there, yes.
Corey, that's a really good question, because we have some work to do in this area, right? Like, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. Some of the work is super high quality and really appreciated, and some of the work is a little muddled. So we're gonna work hard with that group. And part of why I'm really glad Chrissy Lucy's here is because she's a partner in this work, but we're gonna work hard with that group and the union to try to make it high interest and high engagement and meaningful, right? Because if somebody's transmitting and nobody's listening, what's the point? And to have it be more hands-on and more like active.
And sometimes we do it through exit tickets or whatever we want to call them, feedback tickets. But at the elementary school, for example, after the training yesterday, we debriefed for about 20 minutes and got immediate feedback from teachers and are already adjusting what we're going to be doing in the future based on that.
Anyone else?
Okay, I'll be quick on a couple of these. For the moment, we're doing okay with COVID. The bivalent boosters are available. I got mine the other day with the flu shot, which I don't necessarily recommend doing both at the same time, but do what you want. So there are cases, but it doesn't look anywhere near overwhelming like it was before. There's also, and this is interesting, just like a general cold going around. It's really hard to distinguish between COVID. And for years we wore a mask, which really protected us from everything. And a few of us are wearing masks, but most of us aren't. So that's a little different. We'll keep an eye on that. We are able to do symptomatic testing. And the big thing is if somebody tests positive, when they come back to school, they wear a mask for 5 additional days, and then they stop wearing it after that. But it's hard to tell who's wearing a mask for what reason. Right, so whatever, that's where we are with that.
Can I throw something on that?
Yeah,
Do
sure.
you think we need, I know we deliberately put as a standing agenda item, the COVID on the agenda. Do we think it needs to stay there, or can we just trust you to update us when we need to know things? Like most.
I would, we never take things off agendas.
I know, I feel like we're always having a whole lot of like, it's
I would love to take something off.
impossible to get on the agenda, it's hard to get off.
I know, I'll if something wacky happens, I'll tell you. And obviously, or maybe not so obviously, that there are like 10, 12 people connected to the town of Great Barrington. So is marketing administrator or manager? I don't remember. He's a manager. So the Great Barrington town manager, somebody from Fairview and emergency planning, somebody from the CHP, nurses from the public health group. All of us do a call like every week or every other week to check in on what's going on. So if some terrible spike comes, I'll let you know.
Peter, is there any indication that, you know, the state or whoever it is moving away from the 5-day mandatory quarantine, where students, if they're still testing positive, have to stay home in the school?
I have to look at it again. I don't think so. I think they're sticking with 5 days. But there's the possibility, I get like 10 directives from those guys a week. There's the possibility I missed something. So I'll take another look at it. And I'd really like to thank our 3.5 nurses who are working really hard on this, because teachers had a rough couple of years. I don't even want to think about how hard it's been to be a nurse the last couple of years. It's really overwhelming. The Regional School District Planning Board, they're chugging along on the transportation study. The little bits of things we have to do for the MSBA. So the vote tonight lets us get in that building committee by the September 30th deadline. Our next deadline is Halloween, like October 31st. And we have to share some numbers and maintenance stuff and some other things. So Christy, Steve, Sharon, and I will be working on that behind the scenes. And probably when we schedule our first meeting of the building committee, that will be we'll talk a little bit about process, introductions, we'll get cookies or something, and then we'll jump into and make sense of those things. That's all I got.
Okay. Policy Subcommittee is not met. Buildings and Grounds, Jason.
Have not met.
Superintendent's evaluation is not met. Technology is not met. We'll get to the one that has. Finance Subcommittee.
Yes, we met earlier today before this meeting and reviewed both the facilities, capital status, as well as the technology, and everything was pretty well smooth. Obviously the goal of these is to identify any big bumps or decreases, and there was none. On the buildings and ground side, there was some talk about kind of large scale capital projects, but not a sense that they would be dealt with in this budget cycle. And on the tech side, it kind of feels like we're in as good a spot as we've been since I've been on the committee. A lot to do with rotating cycles of devices and things like that, but that seems pretty stable and doesn't look like there's going to be a massive change in the budget this year going forward. We meet again on October 6th, once again before a school committee meeting. And I think we take on special education and elementary school at that meeting. So if people are interested in those topics.
We will need to move the special education to November because something has come up.
Okay.
Director. So we will have the elementary school.
Perfect. Well, we can fill a whole meeting on elementary school anyway, so it's good.
And I'm going to do a better job of messaging to the broader community, both our finance subcommittee meetings and our school committee meetings. And I'll try to, I don't want to remind people 2 weeks in advance because it's too much, right? But there'll be a regular email that goes out from me or my office the Monday of the meetings on Thursday to remind people that they may want to join. And then connected to the finance subcommittee, Sharon and I will do like a little budget 101 for people in the district and people outside the district. What often happens is folks who don't understand the budget process make a giant recommendation in February to do something, and it's too late. Though it's not always too late. Sometimes people squeeze things in, but if people understood the process and brought things up to their principals as their principals are planning things, we would be in a more collaborative and I think better place. So. And school committee members are welcome to join that. Staff also, and for that matter, parents are welcome to join.
I think we're going to use for finance subcommittee the same link for the school committee, so you can just hang out and be at both meetings without having to go through 2 different links.
Yeah.
Mostly because it confuses me too.
Well, it confuses all of us. Okay, Peter, anything on the personnel report?
No, I think it's fairly straightforward. A lot of stipends connected to grants.
Okay, any old or new business? Public comment, Eric.
Here, I can promote her.
I thanks for that. Oh, thank you. I actually had a question just about, I think you guys just answered it about joining the finance subcommittee. I thought I was trying to do that earlier, but was it available via the link or was it only in person?
No, it
was
was
a different-
available. It was a Google link, but I think it was confusing. So we had the link open for the whole meeting, but you probably tried to go to the Zoom link for the broader school committee meeting.
That is
So I'm sorry about that. Going forward, it'll just be one Zoom link, and when the first meeting ends, we'll just mute the system for like the 5 minutes between meetings.
Okay, thank you.
And Erica, if you want, give me a call tomorrow and I'll summarize it in like 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else for public comment? Seeing no one, by unanimous consent, we are adjourned.